So let's get back to our discussion of Gatsby. Right? Great Gatsby. So the first character that we're trying to look at and get some understanding of is Tom Buchanan. And you mentioned that one of the prominent characteristics of Tom Buchanan is that he likes to control others. All right. So we're going to use this characteristic of Tom Buchanan and see if it helps us explain his attitude toward Jordan Baker. Okay. So what is Tom Buchanan's attitude toward Jordan Baker? Does he like her? Does he dislike her? Tom Buchanan likes to control other people, right? So how does this explain, or can we use this characteristic to explain his attitude toward Jordan Baker? Now, who's Jordan Baker? Very quickly.
Golf player.
Okay, she's a golf player, but she's also Daisy's childhood friend, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and she's a golf player. So this is where Tom Buchanan makes a comment about Jordan Baker before she goes up to go to stairs for the night, because she's got practice tomorrow or she's got a golf tournament, right? So this is what she says. She says, "Good night, Mr. Carraway. See you anon. Right? See you soon." And then, "Of course you will," confirmed Daisy. "In fact, I think I'll arrange a marriage. Come over often, Nick, and I'll sort of, fling you together. You know, lock you up accidentally in the linen closets and push you out to sea in a boat, and all that sort of thing. Now, good night," called Miss Baker from the stairs. "I haven't heard a word." Now, this is what Tom Buchanan says, right, as Jordan Baker's ascending the stairs to go to bed that night. He says, "She's a nice girl," said Tom after a moment. "They oughtn't to let her run around the country this way." What does that mean? They oughtn't to let her run around the country this way. This relates back to this characteristic that Tom likes to control others. So what is he pointing out that he dislikes about Jordan Baker? What does he have that, according to him, women shouldn't have? Travel? Okay, well, how is she able to travel? She does what for a living? She's a golf player, right? Okay, now think about this. Does Daisy have a job?
No.
Does Daisy Buchanan have a job?
No.
So who is Daisy dependent on? Tom. Now think about another woman in Tom Buchanan's life, Myrtle, right? Does Myrtle have a job? No. Who's paying for the apartment in New York City that Tom Buchanan and Myrtle visit? Is Myrtle paying for it?
Tom.
No, Tom is, right? So both Myrtle and Daisy are dependent on Tom, right? In other words, they're under his control. He doesn't like Jordan Baker is because, well, she's a golf player. So what does being a golf player allow her to have that the other women in the story don't have? Do the other women have a source of income? No. So as a golf player, she has her own source of income. So that means she's independent of Tom Buchanan's control. Does he like that?
No.
No, that's why he says, right? "She's a nice girl," said Tom after a moment. "They oughtn't to let her run around the country this way." Right? So he doesn't like the fact that she's independent. In other words, she is outside of his control. The other women in his life, Daisy and Myrtle, are securely under his control because they need him economically. So how does this sort of manliness translate into the way that he tries to dominate others? Well, Daisy and Myrtle are dependent on him economically, and he doesn't like Jordan Baker because she's independent of his influence, right? And so now we're going to see how he sort of interacts with Nick, right? So, describing this, the narrator says, Nick says, turning me around by one arm, he moved a broad, flat hand along the front vista, including in its sweep a sunken Italian garden, right? So he's just sort of grabbing Nick and moving him around, right? And then Nick says, he turned me around again, politely and abruptly, right? So he's just sort of moving Nick around where he wants to move Nick. Tom Buchanan compelled me from the room as though he were moving a checker to another square, right? So all of these descriptions of how he physically interacts with Nick show what? Who is in control of the situation in the way that he physically interacts with Nick? Is Nick in control? No. It's Tom. Tom is the one who's sort of grabbing him by the arm and leading him around. Tom is the one that's sort of pushing him to the next room like a checker, right? So it's Tom sort of physically asserting his dominance over Nick, right? And this is even continued in chapter 2. And his determination to have my company bordered on violence, right? And then a little bit before that, he's describing how he sort of grabs Nick and forces him off the train. He says, I went up to New York with Tom on the train one afternoon, and when we stopped by the ash heaps, he jumped to his feet and taking hold of my elbow, literally forced me from the car, right? So again, in all of these descriptions of physical interaction between Nick and Tom, who is consistently in control of the situation? Is it Nick?
No.
No, it's always Tom, right? So Tom is sort of physically dominating Nick. The thing that sort of most impresses us about Tom is his sort of physical presence, right? That's what defines Tom's character, right? His sort of overwhelming physical presence, his manliness, right? As it expresses itself. In some ways, this novel is about the distinction between appearance, in other words, how things seem, and reality. So let's see if we can use that distinction to examine Tom Buchanan, right? We've already said that he is a character who likes to be in control of those around him, right? And we've seen this in the way that he sort of physically dominates Nick, right? Sort of grabbing a hold of him and moving him like a checker from one space to another, right? Not only that, but Daisy and Myrtle are economically dependent on him, and he likes that, right? Let's ask the question, is Tom really manly? He seems manly. He's a big guy, right? And when he's in the room, he sort of takes control of other people, right? He dominates the women, and the women that he can't dominate, he doesn't like, right? This is why he doesn't like Jordan Baker, because he can't exert any influence over her. What great war just took place? What great war just took place in Europe? The First World War, right? 1914 and 1918, right? Now, what was Tom doing? Was he fighting in the war?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, no.
Try again.
Gatsby.
That's right. Gatsby was fighting in the war. Who else was fighting in the war? All right, let me ask this question. Why could you remember? Because Nick Carraway is related to Daisy Buchanan, right? Why couldn't Nick attend the marriage of Daisy and Tom Buchanan?
He was fighting the war.
That's right. Nick was fighting the war, right? So Nick was fighting. And Gatsby was fighting. What was Tom Buchanan doing? He wasn't fighting. He was getting what? He was getting married. Tom Buchanan was getting married. He seems to be very manly, and he enjoys sort of controlling other people, either physically or economically. He likes being in control, right? What better way to demonstrate your manliness than to go to war and fight in defense of your country? Does Tom Buchanan do that?
No.
No. Not like Nick. Not like Gatsby. Okay. So now, another way of sort of demonstrating your manliness, right, is to sort of beat up on people who are stronger than you, right? That would be a good way of asserting your manliness. Not beating up on someone, say, the same size as you or weaker than you. That's too easy. But someone stronger than you. Does Tom Buchanan do that in the novel? Who does he beat up in the novel? Whose nose does he break in the novel? He breaks Myrtle's nose, right? Why does he break Myrtle's nose? Because he can. Does that seem very manly? After all, the way Nick has described Tom, he's a big guy, right? Is it a manly thing to break a woman's nose? No. So, he beats women. All right. So, he has this presence, this appearance of manliness, but when it comes to how he really acts, he doesn't seem too manly. After all, he didn't participate in the First World War. He was getting married, and the only people he beats up in the novel are not people bigger than him, but, women, right? And then, what about George Wilson at the end of the novel? George Wilson comes to Tom Buchanan's house. Why?
Car.
George wants to find out whose car is the yellow car, right? Who owns the yellow car? Now, George Wilson comes to Tom Buchanan's house with a gun, right? Now, imagine this. You're wealthy, right? You live in East Egg. You have a big mansion. You have lots of money. You're a big guy. Somebody comes to your house with a gun. What are you going to do?
Fire.
Yeah, you're going to defend your house. You're going to defend your wife. Does Tom do any of those things? No. It's not my car. No. It's Gatsby's car. Go shoot him. Right? So, when he's confronted by another man, in other words, given the chance to sort of express his manliness and defend his home and defend his wife, does he fight George? No. He sends him away by simply telling him it's Gatsby's car.